Hello, and welcome to 5 Minutes of Postgres. My name is Lucas, and today we're going to talk about reducing replication lag by setting the maintenance IO concurrency setting in Postgres 15. This is a blog post by Thomas Munro on the Ash Database for Postgres blog, and he talks about an improvement that he made to Postgres 15 that reduces replication lag by using what's called recovery prefetch. When Thomas references the concept of recovery, what he means is the replica applying the replication stream to the actual data directory by looking at each wall record. And what Thomas has done here to showcase how that works is he ran a pgbench and he used a scale factor that doesn't fit into RAM. That's important because if things fit into RAM, then you don't need additional IO concurrency. Really, it's just a problem of working with the working set in memory. But once you go outside of the working set being in memory, then you care about IO concurrency at recovery. This matters if you have very large databases. It also matters if you have full page write turned off, because that causes a lot of random IO. And so in these situations, the new maintenance IO concurrency use for recovery is going to be useful. Now in this test setup, Thomas uses a pgbench with a scale factor of 1,000 and 32 clients on primary. He also has a stream replica with maintenance IO concurrency either set to 0 to behave like Postgres 14 has behaved, or set to 10, which is the Postgres 15 default, or higher values to showcase how it behaves. This graph here is really showing the main impact of this change. On the very left side of this graph, in the first 30 seconds, you can see when the maintenance IO concurrency setting is set to 0. At that point, the replication lag on the replica will increase quite drastically. And the reason for that is these 32 clients on a pgbench, they do a lot of writes on the primary system, produce a lot of wall, and the secondary just can't keep up with that wall because the secondary looks at one wall record at a time, fetches the page necessary, and then applies that. Now, Thomas goes and increments the maintenance IO concurrency. So you can see where the blue line starts and the green dotted line is the maintenance IO concurrency setting. And so maintenance IO concurrency set to 10. That means that Postgres will go and will advise the Linux system which pages to look for that it will need momentarily. So it still reads one page at a time, but it gives Linux a heads up and says, hey, I'm about to meet these other pages. The IO concurrency follows pretty closely to the maintenance IO concurrency setting as a maximum. And so you can see that the replication lag decreases when it's set to 10, and then when it's set to 30, the replication lag goes down first and then goes away completely. Then Thomas steps it down again to see what's the right maintenance IO concurrency setting, and ultimately ends on a setting of 16, showing that that essentially keeps the replication lag at a minimum. Now, it's important to note that this is an advice-based scheme. The way this works is Postgres gives Linux a heads up and says, I'm about to meet these pages. Please read them into the OS page graph for me so that when I actually need them, they're already cached. And really, this tries to solve recovery stalling on IO. If you don't have this prefetching, what happens is that the IO will take time. And so as recovery happens, the recovery process will wait for the IO to complete and then do the next one. If you have a lot of clients that do writes, then that causes a lot of IO stalls on the secondary, causing higher replication lag. So I think this is a pretty cool improvement, and this uses the Postgres fadvice call. And this is not true async IO. This is just having the Linux kernel do async IO for us because Postgres 15 does not yet have async IO capabilities. What's really exciting though is that Thomas and team are working on true async IO. I think the next 2 Postgres releases, we'll see a lot of exciting improvements around async IO. Async IO is what we need to get much more performance out of Postgres in a typical cloud environment because you increase the IO concurrency and you make sure that Postgres does not stall. So pretty exciting stuff. And when you upgrade to Postgres 15, you can tweak the maintenance IO concurrency setting to reduce your replication lag and get fast recovery in Postgres. Thank you so much for listening. This was 5 Minutes of Postgres. Subscribe to our YouTube channel to hear about next week's episode. Talk to you next week.